Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Luke.
Ty. I'm Drew.
I'm Sarah.
And we're Group 4, and we're going to be talking to you today about Chapter 4, of course. It's called Craft the Content. I'll give you a brief overview. We're going to be talking about exploring possible content to talk about in your presentation. Just kind of figuring out the topics you're going to present. We're also going to be talking about deciding what to say. And we're going to be talking about Q&A portion, because if you successfully present, hopefully you'll have a lot of response from the audience, and you'll want to know how to address that. So we're going to be talking about questions and then opposing views in the audience. All right, so starting out, exploring possible content. There are three very important things about this. Number one is to gather. Okay, and we're going to start with what you know. So talk amongst your peers, think about your previous experiences, and just kind of decide what you know for sure. And you want to know your audience. You want to understand who you're presenting to. If you're presenting to a second grade class, it's a lot different than a group of business majors, so you want to keep that in mind. One useful tool is what you can see up here. It's called a mind map. It's more of a graphic tool, and it's just an aid that you can kind of center your objective, and it's got branches out, and you can kind of organize your topics, and you can do color-coded shapes, whatever. It's all your own to create. And also, when you research for more information, you do want to keep in mind that your audience, who you're presenting to, you want to make sure that the information you gather will resonate with your audience. And number two of the important three is focus. You can start with drafting a presentation objective, which we learned about in Chapter 2. You kind of start with your topic, and then you talk about what you'd like to achieve if you present that topic. And if you get stuck, don't worry, just choose one thing, and just try and focus on getting that message to your audience. And then you can work from there and kind of grow your presentation. Some other focusing techniques is there's an email technique, which you can read about in the book, and then you're all familiar with what's called an elevator pitch. And that's actually very useful when you're trying to start a presentation and you're trying to think of ideas. You kind of just go through 90 seconds worth and talk about important information that you can include. And finally, we've got number three is order. And, excuse me. So in this one, you want to discover categories and how they're linked, and you want to put them together so that when you're presenting it in an orderly fashion, and you keep stringing along the audience, and that way they don't get confused or hung up on various portions. One way to start planning for that is to use an outline. That's kind of a text-based just tool, and you've got your standard ABC. You're all familiar with it. And then there's also an idea chart, which is more of a visual representation once again. And I've got an example. When my brother and I were younger, and we'd go trick-or-treating, and we'd come home and take our bags of candy and dump it all over the floor, and then we kind of sort it. So you've got the good stuff like Snickers and Skittles, and then you got like the not so good stuff like mints and the little soft, chewy, taffy things. But they're still both equally important to the topic as a whole. So that's kind of what an idea chart is. You take your ideas, you take your information you gathered, and you spill it out, and then you kind of collect it, organize it, categorize it, so that when you're presenting, you can go from this category to this category and make links, and that will really help get across your point. And if all else fails, create your own method. Okay, these are just suggestions. They're very tried and true methods, but if you want to make like a physical mobile with labels on it, if that helps you, then go for it. The only things you need to remember is that make sure you know what you're talking about. Make sure you understand your audience so that you can present it to them, and also make sure it's ordered properly so that they follow along and they receive the whole presentation how you meant it. And I'm going to pass it over to Ty. He's going to talk about deciding what to say.
Thank you, Luke. As you can see here, I'm discussing section 2, which talks about deciding what you'll be saying. The three most important topics in this section discusses decide how you open, plan a well-organized body, and then finally determining how to close. In deciding how to open, the first thing that's most important is setting the stage. It shapes your presentation, pushes the tone and the direction you'd like to go into. The second thing is grab your audience's attention. Obviously, you don't want people snoozing off in the corner, not paying attention, just waiting for the presentation to end so you can leave. You want to get their attention, ask a question, or even just flat out tell people why you want to pay attention. Which in this case, you do want to pay attention because at the end of this, there will be a quiz. And finally, always include a preview. Just like Luke did when he introduced us, he kind of hit the three main sections we'll be talking about. That kind of gives your audience an idea of what you'll be discussing. Second, you'll want to plan a well-organized body. There are two types of presentations, tell and sell presentations. Tell presentations mainly they talk about mainly listing key ideas, discussing major findings and things like that. Sell presentations focus on why and push for a change. They push an idea or a service or a product, and they tell you why you should choose that and why you should believe in this. And if they do their job correctly, you will. And the last thing is moving from section to section. You want to make sure that is smooth. Like I wouldn't want to bring up the body first, then the conclusion, then the opening. I want to do opening, body, then conclusion. Finally, you want to determine how you'll close. So for an informative talk, there's mainly to close. You want to summarize your final key points. Just go over your bullet points and make sure you went over all three in my case. Making sure everyone understands them, so when they leave, the last thing they heard you say was your bullet points. For a persuasive talk, you want to use your final comments to summarize and close the sale. Bring up the points that you think are most important, why they should go with your product or service, or believe what you believe. Finally, when you close, you want to use initial and final closing statements. For informative talks, there's really only one type of close, which is your initial. You just, like I said, you bring up your summary, you close, and then hopefully, if you bring everything up correctly, there are no questions and answers. But for persuasive, there are two closings. There's initial closing, and then finally, after you do initial closing in your Q&A, there's a final closing where you just summarize all the questions and answers, your topics, and hopefully everything's been answered. And to talk about questions and answers, Sarah is going to continue.
Thanks, Ty. So now that you guys know what to put in your presentation, I'm going to talk about the questions and answers. Usually when we're done with our presentations, we get to the Q&A part, we're like, now I can breathe and relax. But when you're trying to convince your audience of something, you have to make sure you maintain that professional manner throughout your entire presentation, even during the Q&A portion, so they stay engaged and interested and you look reliable. So there are three main steps: prepare, listen, and respond. So for prepare, make sure you know about your topic, research it, so that when people ask questions, you're able to respond effectively. And when people ask questions, a good way to look at it is take it as a compliment and be like, wow, this person is really interested in my presentation when I had to say that they're asking questions. So that's such a good mood for the entire audience. And another important thing is to decide when you're going to be taking questions. In some presentations, you can let people ask questions throughout the entire presentation, so we're all on the same page. But if you're on a time crunch, leaving them till the end is best. Secondly, you have to refine your listening skills. So be a good listener, engage participation, and paraphrase the question. So if Abby asks me a question, she is the most important person in the room. I have to look at her, maintain eye contact, smile, listen to what she's saying so she feels like she's important. And if say Abby asks a question, but Taylor over there may not have heard, so I have to repeat the question so everyone can understand, everyone is on the same page, and everyone feels included. Lastly, I have to respond effectively. So if you ask me a question, I can't trail off and start talking about something else. I have to focus on what you're asking me and respond to that. It's okay to say I don't know. It's better to be honest to your audience than bluff and lie to them and tell them, act like you know everything. And lastly, keep everyone involved. If sometimes the audience doesn't want to really engage in questions, that's when you ask them questions, not yes or no questions, but ask open-ended questions where they can get involved and get engaged. So the three main things are prepare, listen, and respond. And now Drew's going to be talking more.
Okay, so the fourth point, we're going to continue with the Q&A, is to listen for challenging questions. And the first type of challenging question is an unclear question. The first important point of this is to use an I response and not a you response. So an example of this would be, I don't understand your question, instead of your question confuses me. And also paraphrase to check your assumptions. So try to see whatever you can understand from the question and repeat that to them. And try to get them to repeat it in a more understandable way. The second one is limiting questions, and this is just different kind of questions, like a hypothetical question that you can't answer. And the important point on this is to kind of just paraphrase again and see if you understood the question correctly, and maybe they could ask it in a respondable way. And the third challenging question is the don't know questions. And the most important point on this is if you don't know the answer, don't bluff. Tell the person that you don't know the answer and could you please repeat it. And also, if you want to take time to think and think if you actually can come up with the right answer, then do that as well. The fifth point is to control difficult or hostile audience members. There's four main different types of difficult audience members, and it's pontificators, which are people who think they know everything, nitpickers who just want to pick apart everything you're doing, needlers who try to use sarcasm and different things like that, and distractors who will just be talking in the corner. That's an example of that. And there's a lot of different tips in the book to handle these kind of audience members, but the main 3 points are to be polite, find mutual agreements, and to use effective listening skills. So those are the 3 main things to remember when dealing with these types of audience members. And the 6th part is dealing with online comments. So the first thing to deal with this is consider the pros and cons and decide how to deal with the back channel. And the back channel is the term for where people in the audience will go to write comments about your presentation. And some pros of having the back channel is you can get more feedback while you're presenting or after the presentation. But a lot of the cons is, it's just people can say nasty things and it just kind of takes away from the presentation. And number 2 is to find out how to manage online interactions. And in the book, it gives a detailed example of how to set up a Twitter account. And I'm not going to go into all that right now, but it'll help a lot. So I think that's going to end it. So thank you all for listening.